Business ownership has never been hotter, but how do you do it? That's where I come in. Allow me to guide you on your journey. Welcome to Ion Franchising. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another fabulous episode of Ion Franchising. I'm your host, Lance Graulich, and my guest today is celebrating a decade, 10 years. For those that don't know what a decade is, I had to look it up. No, I'm just kidding. A decade of care in the home care industry. We're going to hear all about it. And this is my new friend, Miss Diana Cabassi. Welcome to the show, Diana.
Thank you so much for having me today.
It is my pleasure. And I love having franchisees on so they can share their story. So first question out of the gate, logical one, how did Diana get into the world of franchising? So I know you were in HR, you're an HR executive, but what got you out of that into a franchise and why home care?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, the impetus behind my joining Seniors Helping Seniors had to do with my own experience with my mother, who has dementia. When we were faced with having to make decisions for Mom, we realized that she still had a lot of life because she is still healthy, and she actually just celebrated her 94th birthday, still with us, in dementia for over 10 years. And, seeing the needs that she had made me realize that I needed to do something. And so basically it all started with her. Got
it. And at that point, were you and the family looking around for somebody to help take care of her when you stumbled upon the home care industry? Because I run into people all the time that have no idea what home care is to this day.
And I still experience many people that don't know what home care is, because there are so many different levels of care. And so, we as a homemaker companionship service are really the lowest level of care. The care that we provide really is to help people stay home independently. And most of the people that we service can still do things for themselves, but are not necessarily safe to be home alone. And so, that's what we offer the family, is to have their parents be able to stay home safely for as long as possible with respect and dignity, which basically we all deserve, right?
Absolutely. I remember years ago when assisted living facilities were popping up everywhere, but then somewhere there was that sort of pivot where mom or dad or whichever relative we're speaking of, grandma, grandpa, they didn't want to go to those assisted living facilities. They wanted to stay home in their own bed. So what was that? Right. What did you observe about that period of time?
So, there does come a time when someone is better off in a facility, when they're a danger to themselves and really can no longer care for themselves. But for many people, most for a long period of time, they're still well enough to be home and have services performed in their homes, with and for them, right? Because many of them participate still in the type of help that we provide. We take people out, right? We take them grocery shopping, and they decide what it is that they would like to eat for that particular week, and we go home and help them put it all away and prepare their meals. And so one of the things that came out of COVID, unfortunately, was the dangers of communal living. And I saw a shift basically in mentality at that time, where most people, if they could, would pull their parents out of the facilities at that time.
Right.
And we stayed busy during COVID, and then after COVID, we really had a huge increase in business because people have really seen that their parents are better, safer at home until they can no longer be there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So so what actually pushed you to leave corporate life? What was that day like when you were like, I think I want to be a franchisee? And
Well,
how did that whole process work for you?
well, to be honest with you, I took a leap of faith um, by leaving my job, which was what sustained me and my family, and coming back to South Florida, which is where my mother was. I was living and working outside of Washington, D.C. For, a major international company, running an HR shared service center for them. So I did very well. But when my mother needed care, I realized that being the only daughter, I needed to be close to mom.
Right.
So basically, I couldn't wrap up my life in Virginia and come back to Florida and look for work at the same time while I'm wrapping up my job. So when I got to Florida, the more I interviewed for work, the more work that presented itself made me feel that the corporate world just wasn't right for me. And I had heard about seniors helping seniors some years before. I actually contacted them when I heard a commercial on the radio for seniors helping seniors. And it was like it resonated because, okay, I'm looking for help for mom. And at the same time, I'm looking for a job for myself.
Yep.
And I called them. I fell in love with the business model because we employ active seniors who in society are really not valued the way that they should be.
No.
And we employ them doing work that dignifies them with people that need help. And
Yes.
so it just is a win-win situation because that relationship is so much better and so much richer than a younger person can bring into a relationship.
Yeah.
So basically, I fell in love with the business model, and the rest was history. They did their due diligence on me because, of
Yeah.
course, they needed to make sure that I was right for their world, and I did my due diligence on them, and it all worked. And 10 years later, to me, it is a success story,
Yeah.
a major success story. It never occurred to me that I was going to have my own business, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that franchising brings to the table. They have the structure in place, they have the support in place, so that if you have just enough intelligence to run a company, that support that's given helps you be able to do it and not, be on your own in trying to build a business.
Yeah. I love that. So 10 years in business. So what has it been like? My clientele that come to me looking for their perfect business, just essentially like you found yours. Most people don't know. They don't necessarily have a calling or have something that they find of particular interest. I have a lot of people that come to me that say, just get me out of corporate America and find me something that I can make money and make my own schedule, have some of the time freedom, money freedom, so to speak. So you were lucky. You had a direction. But, who's good at home care? I mean, you had a calling. But how do you know if you're listening to this podcast that home care is for you? Like when you look across the spectrum of other successful franchisees in your company, Seniors Helping Seniors, what do you all have in common besides empathy, that you like seniors and you want to help?
So I think we get more emotional rewards in the line of work that we do because we truly make a big difference in the lives of seniors. I can't tell you how many times I'll get a call from an adult child that is calling because the mother is depressed because the father has passed away, and now she's alone, and she sees no value in her life because her life was caring for her husband, who
Right.
has since passed. Because unfortunately, typically that's what happens. Although we do, of course, service men as well, but in proportion, the women outlive their spouses, right? So
Yes.
basically, the men are cared for by their wives. And then when they pass away, the wives sometimes really need a lot of help because their life has been focused on another individual. And
Yeah.
so basically, we come in and help that person in whatever it is that they need. And we can't diminish the importance of companionship as well, because when people are lonely, um, they get all kinds of thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And not only do they not feel well emotionally, that also affects the physical health. And so when we have an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life that doesn't really value their life anymore, it just is so important, right? And it
Yeah.
gives you
Absolutely.
such reward
Yeah.
emotionally to make that happen. And I see it time and time and time and time and time again.
Yeah. So in 10 years, you've made plenty of friends that are existing franchisees that you've collaborated with. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about franchising too, is you make new friends, and now that are all sharing maybe ideas on how to be even more successful in this brand. Is
Right.
that fair to say?
Absolutely. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I really love about Seniors Helping Seniors is that they bring everybody together, right? They're cohesive in their approach of partnering with the franchisees. We have a monthly call. We're all invited to participate in their call. It's something typically new to the business for us to consider, or giving advice to one partner with things that have been helped them become successful. And so basically, they make it a point to bring us together. And actually, next month, or are we in December? No, we're not in December yet. Almost. We're going to have a block party, right? So we're just going to
Nice.
get together on Zoom and have a block party, right?
I
Who
love it.
does that? So
I
it's
love it.
great. It's
That's
great.
great. Hopefully they send you a bottle of wine to toast with.
Oh, well, that would be nice.
So when it comes to 10 years in the business, a lot of my clientele is worried about what we call the ramp up period. Everybody's always so nervous about leaving their job and getting to the point where they can make some money as quickly as possible. And look, you're at 10 years now. Most businesses would just, I mean, talk about franchise envy. Diana's made it to 10 years. So talk a little bit about, your 10-year history, and what was like phase one like for you in the first couple of years versus today, and how is that different?
It's substantially different. It did take a while to ramp up, and I had actually anticipated that it would be around 3 years where I would finally break even with my investment. It did take me a little bit longer, but at the same time, I was learning the
Yeah.
industry because I had come from a very different world.
Yes.
And so nobody is born knowing the
Right.
things that work and that don't work, right? And you could learn from experience from other people, but until you're actually in it and doing it, because the demographics are different everywhere.
Yeah.
In South Florida, where I am, we have the highest percentage of seniors probably in the world,
Yeah.
but definitely in the United States.
Yeah.
Um, and so the competition is so very severe.
Yeah.
There are so many home companies, mostly home health. And so people don't necessarily understand the difference between home health care and home care, right?
Right.
Because the home health basically is in responding to a health crisis for the most part, right? But the people that we service aren't necessarily going to be going through some health crisis. I mean, they may while we're going through that, through their
Right.
lives with them. But I have a client who's been my client since I started the business.
Fantastic. Great for the
We started when she was still married. Her husband had dementia. She was well, but had macular degeneration. And so as the time went by, her her husband passed away and her eyesight got worse and worse. And we still care for her very actively. And so, to know that you've made a decade of difference in someone's life is just really mind-blowing.
it's amazing. So how many employees do you have now? Again,
Uh,
you were mentioning at the beginning when you started, I would imagine that was difficult. An executive in HR, human resources, although there's an advantage because you're used to the hiring process and understand that, it's still a totally different industry. So
Right.
how many employees did you start with versus how many do you have now?
Well, I actually got my first client before I had anyone to do the work.
Wow.
So I was my first employee.
I love it.
That didn't last long because I was recruiting. But one of the things about and to answer that question, I have more than 35 people, 36, probably 37 at this point, who are providing the services.
Nice.
And so basically, um, I am very particular with who I employ. I have to make sure that whoever is working with seniors, helping seniors, represents me appropriately and represents the brand appropriately. Because, let's face it, the brand is very important, right? And
Absolutely.
if the brand has a good reputation, then that's going to bring more work into your office.
Yeah,
If the brand has a bad reputation, you can forget about it,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So, it's not only you yourself as your franchise owner of your particular territory, but the entire franchise system needs to be in the same mindset, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely. So, do you have an opportunity where you mentor anybody that comes into the brand? I would imagine there's still plenty of new franchisees coming into the system. They get
right,
trained by corporate, and at
they
some
do,
point they have questions.
they do, and
Call
they call.
Diana. She's been doing it 10 years.
And they do. And as I had called more senior franchisees when I first started, we all share experiences so that, you know, if somebody is calling to advertise on golf carts or whatever, you realize, no, that's not really good because I already put my money into that. Forget that. Right. And so, you figure out what makes sense in terms of, you doing your public relations and, you know, invest your money as wisely as possible, right? Because,
Yeah.
we don't want to be losing money.
Yeah. So, share with the audience some tips and tricks to being a successful franchisee. I would imagine it all starts with following the system. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, the brand gives you a framework from which to use. And, one of the things that I do love about them is that they give you the framework, but you also have the opportunity to do things your own ways, provided we're staying within our guidelines, right?
Right.
And, we basically have to be prudent in how we staff, because if you're not bringing the money in enough to cover a staff member, then you start slowly, right? I started
Right.
slowly. I started by myself. Eventually, I hired someone to come in the afternoons to, help with some paperwork and at the same time help answer phones. And then as time went by, I hired someone as a scheduler who basically takes the schedule and, handles all of that. And, at this point, I actually have 6 people supporting me. One does digital marketing, one does marketing, but not, I don't have anyone except for my scheduler who's full time,
Mhm.
right? So I have an somebody who works in accounting, someone who works, answering phones and basically supporting me, but I didn't actually employ them until I had the resources in order to be able to employ them because, unless you're independently wealthy, in which case you wouldn't be working in a franchise system or any other, you really need to be prudent with your
Yeah,
expenses. Yeah.
absolutely. We all want to make a profit. So,
Right.
these days, a lot of people are talking about having difficulty hiring people. How has that gone for you? You've been doing it 10 years. I'm sure you figured out some good stuff.
So I really don't have um, difficulty attracting people. I do get a lot of people that are attracted to seniors, helping seniors, and would like to work for us. Because keep in mind, we have many seniors in South Florida, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I, am very critical in who I engage in conversation with, first of all, and then obviously, um, we don't necessarily employ everyone who we speak to because we're also very interested in an appropriate fit, right? So if someone is hard of hearing, which most of our seniors are, it's difficult for me to have someone who has a thick accent working
Yes.
with them, right? So these are all the things that you learn as time goes by, um, and if you look at it through the lens of an adult child and what expectation we have for our parents, then it's helpful,
Yes.
and I live it basically
Right.
through my mom, who we still have, who I'm very blessed to have at the age of 94.
I love it. God bless mom. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So 10 years. What is next? How many years are you doing this?
Well,
20, 30, 40?
I don't know, maybe until I die. I don't really know. I've worked hard, long and hard my entire life. I'm the child of immigrants, so I didn't have a gold spoon, silver spoon, bronze spoon. I had no spoon. And so everything that I've done, I've worked very hard for. And so I would like not to work as much when I get to my retirement age, which is still 3 years down the line. Um, I had originally thought, well, maybe I'm going to sell the franchise and, get my money back and live happily ever after. But I'm also someone who's very driven and someone who needs to work.
Yeah.
So, more and more I'm thinking about, you know, basically perhaps hiring a manager
Mhm.
that I could then manage
Yes.
and, give someone else an opportunity to learn how to run a franchise too, right? Without
Absolutely.
actually being a franchise owner.
I love it.
And so, maybe I'll mentor someone in these next, well, not this year, not next year, but, you know, in a couple more years.
I've said recently that you should put yourself in a financial position to retire and don't, because to you, in your very own words on this podcast, you have a purpose. You certainly have a passion and you love what you do. So why would you retire? Why wouldn't you
Right.
keep doing
Yeah.
what you're doing? You could work less,
Right.
still pull the strings, still be the boss.
Right. No,
And
I figured I still need to hold the purse,
yes,
make sure that the money that's coming in and the money that's going out is the right thing, right? Because you never know. I
absolutely.
mean, you could trust people and, you know, be fooled by them. But at the same time, I do believe that I've earned the right to be able to retire. What that retirement looks like doesn't have to be completely doing nothing. Maybe I'll become a senior helping senior. What can I say?
Yes.
I'll be a companion.
Well, Diana, you've shared a lot of great info with the audience. Final thoughts for anybody looking to get into home care and want to follow in your footsteps? Any final words of advice?
So, I mean, if you're looking for something that not only gives you financial rewards, but emotional rewards, our franchise system is a wonderful place to be. I know that there are many other very successful franchises, and it all depends on your own personality and what works for you. Home care is hard work. It is a lot of hard work because, unfortunately, your customers are constantly turning over,
Yes.
right? So it's not, build the business and rest on your laurels. You have to constantly be looking for more work because, our clients get to the point where we are no longer good enough. That's not a nice way to say it, but really no longer good enough. And so then they transition, right?
Yeah.
And so basically, you really have to have the heart and the love of people to be able to do this work and be good at it and build a good reputation.
So when you say good enough, just one follow-up question. Is that like, when companion care sometimes feels like it could be babysitting an adult, but
Yeah.
also truly being a companion? So describe that a little bit more on the good enough part.
Well, we can do anything for a person as a homemaker companion. And by the way, Seniors Helping Seniors does also have home health in different states because this work is regulated
Right.
by the state and our licensing
Got it.
requirements. And so as a homemaker companion, we are the lowest level of care.
Mhm.
And so we do things for people with and for them that doesn't involve work to their body.
Right.
So
Okay.
basically, we, in addition to the companionship, we can help with some light housekeeping with their laundry. We could take them grocery shopping, prepare meals for them,
Mhm.
remind them when it's time to take their medication, take them on outings. I have several clients that we go and take them to the beauty salon, get their hair done, get their nails done, and take people out for dinner to enjoy life, basically. But when they get to the point where they are no longer able to care for their own bodies and need routine care for their
Gotcha.
hygiene, that is not something that I can continue to do.
Right. So
And
gotcha. Now I understand. I want to make sure the audience was clear on that.
right,
Basically, you can't provide that care anymore, and they need somebody more medically competent, if you will, or
exactly,
maybe assisted
absolutely.
living.
Yeah, and I have actually developed very good relationships with people throughout the industry. And when I can no longer care for someone because they've gotten to the next level of care need, I am able to help the families and transition the families to help
Love it.
them get to that next level of need.
Yeah, and it's nice because they trust you and they certainly trust your referral.
They do. And,
Yeah.
some people really don't go to that next step with the families. They let them find their own way, but you fall in love with the people that you're servicing.
Yeah.
At least from my perspective, I fall in love with the
Yeah.
people that I'm servicing and the families that, and I'm an advocate for the family. So I am always there to help the family get to the next step, whatever that happens to be.
Well, Diana, I appreciate you sharing your story. Thank you for being here, celebrating a decade of care, Miss Diana Cabassi. Cabassi, I said it right.
Kabasi.
Perfect.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lance.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
All righty.
If you're ready to talk about franchise opportunities, hit the link below to schedule a call. My services are free. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.